Hello everyone, this is Eric, the Asian movie enthusiast, and I welcome you to my winter horror wonderland. As you can see, outside I am getting pummeled with snow. It's really not too bad. It looks worse than it actually is. Probably get about 4 inches. But in any case, this is part 4 of our journey through Asian horror films released in 2008, which means that these are my personal favorite movies from this particular year. Unfortunately, the current availability of these movies on DVD is quite poor. A few of them had wide DVD releases years ago at one point, but are now out of print. However, I definitely recommend that you put these titles on your to-see list because I enjoyed them all quite a bit. And as always, titles for all of the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. And we begin with a welcome return to the films based on the works of Kazuo Umezu. Remember, we covered 10 such films so far: The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch from 1968, Baptism of Blood from 1996, all 6 installments of the Kazuo Umezu Manga Horror Theater film series from 2005, Cat-Eyed Boy from 2006, and God's Left Hand, Devil's Right Hand, also from 2006. And our film tonight is called Tamami, the Baby's Curse. This is from Japan. A teenaged orphan girl suddenly learns that she's actually not an orphan at all and will be moving back in with her birth family. But the happy reunion she hopes for may not be in the cards. Waiting for her in a mansion that all the townsfolk think is haunted is an insane mother and an evil housekeeper. Although she is welcomed by her father that has searched for her for many years, even his love can't protect her from what lives in the attic, a mutant baby monster. So as I mentioned earlier, this is based off of the works of Kazuo Umezu, and this has a number of similarities to the Umezu-based short film Wish from the Manga Horror Theater film series, in terms of pitting a young child against an equally small yet vicious demonic entity. But this full-length feature offers a much healthier helping of all of the goodies. So the visuals in this film are actually quite nice. The mansion environment is sufficiently moody. Basically, the entire film takes place in the mansion or around the grounds of the mansion. It starts off as kind of a traditional creepy house endeavor, but it morphs into a full-blown horror action flick later on, which is quite a bit of fun. The baby's got an ugly mug, and he gets pissed really easily, so the filmmakers know this, and they do the right thing, and toss in a few absurdly long, bloody slugfests between the little girl and the baby, and anyone else who's unfortunate or unlucky enough to get in the way. So some of the death scenes are obviously pretty cool. I enjoy those. This film has a playful, light aura of slight cheesiness that is somewhat difficult to pull off amidst the variety of serious overtones that surround it. But this is the case with most of the films that are based off of Umezu's work, so if you've seen any of those, you know what to expect in this one. They have kind of an odd feel to them, but that's one of the reasons why I enjoy them. There's something a little different. So I definitely recommend Tamami, the Baby's Curse. And as I mentioned, it's difficult to find on DVD. I have a DVD in my collection. There used to be an all-region DVD floating around on eBay, but for some reason it's off the market now. So, keep checking. It might pop up again, used or in some other form. But definitely check Tamami the Baby's Curse out. Our next film tonight is one that is not well known. It's from Thailand, and it is called Memory. This is kind of a horror-drama hybrid. A married psychiatrist is tasked with looking in on an abused 7-year-old girl. When faced with accusations, her mother cannot explain the bruises on the girl's body. But as the psychiatrist participates in the case, he finds himself falling in love with the girl's mother. So the lead actor here is Ananda Everingham, who previously starred in Shudder, so you'll probably recognize this actor if you choose to see this film. So it's nice to see him here as well. He's a good actor. This film, Memory, is a quality, classy, atmospheric, dramatic horror film. The acting and the camera work are very nicely executed. They're good quality stuff. The horror scenes, making use of a mix of creepiness and shocks, are restrained enough to fuel the conflicts rather than simply existing for their own right. They're not just chucked in. They do have connections to the conflicts in the storyline, so that's good. Although the story itself is somewhat familiar, a psychiatrist treats a little girl with a mysterious past, it maintains interest due to the strong character interaction at work and a well-developed antagonist. Now, the pacing is slow here, especially during the second half of the film, but the conclusion is well-conceived, thought-provoking, and a logical extension of preceding events. So just like something like The Victim, when I thought the Thai horror film from 2006, I believe, when, the ending, or there was a twist at one point that was unexpected, but it's still a logical conclusion of what came before it. That's the same with Memory. The twists come in, and they're not so outlandish that they're stupid. They're quite good, I thought. So I enjoyed this one. Memory has never been widely available. I saw it on YouTube. Right now there's a lower grade version on YouTube. It might have subtitles, but I don't think you're going to find this on DVD because I've been looking for years. But, just keep looking for it on YouTube or some of the other streaming sites and it might pop up again. And we go again to another Thai horror film. This one is more well known, and it is called Phobia, also known as Phobia with the number 4 in front of it. This is a Thai horror anthology, and it's an anthology of 4 short supernatural horror films, approximately 25 minutes each or so. So let's go through each of them here. Loneliness, the first story, is about a young girl named Pin, who is stuck in her apartment due to the cast on her leg. In her boredom, she communicates with the outside world via cell phone and text messages. So after her boyfriend goes on a camping trip, she feels especially lonely. One night she begins exchanging text messages with a stranger who asks to befriend her and seems friendly enough, as he is also laid up with his own injury. So this is my favorite segment of this particular anthology, due mostly to its high-quality execution. Despite the use of some genre-like formulas, the camera work, music, and acting are all very impressive in this. Our protagonist is a very likable girl as well, and the situation gets progressively more odd as it moves along, which creates kind of a growing sense of unease and paranoia from the viewer while you're watching it. So I think this is a first-rate, slow-burner horror film with practically no dialogue in it, since most of the communication is via text messaging. So again, I've mentioned in some of my recent DVD collection videos that, the Korean director Kim Ki-duk has a few movies that have like almost no dialogue between the two main characters. And that gives kind of an interesting little nuance that you don't see very often in movies. And this film, Loneliness, kind of adds that to its positives, I guess you can say. So it's a little different and it's very good quality. Now the second story, Tit for Tat, also known as Deadly Charm. A student sees his schoolmates take some drugs and is subsequently bullied and beaten to death. So one of the gang's members is worried about this, but fails to stop her friends from this horrid act. Unfortunately, when the victim dies, he curses his friends, well, can you really call them friends at this point, with the power of a deadly charm. Events then churn into motion when ordered by this guy's soul, and one by one the drug addicts start dying in horrifying ways. So, the first film here in this anthology, Loneliness, was a very classy film. This one's more uneven. Tit for Tat is more uneven, but it is grittier and more mean-spirited. So it's a pretty good entry. It's basically classified within the subgenre of witchcraft slasher horror, which is, we've seen a few times in Thai horror already. It has some pretty good visuals and death scenes to enjoy. I especially liked the yellow color scheme that makes its way into it. In terms of flaws, the editing is a bit sloppy and the CGI is poor at times, but the positives, I think, overcome the negatives in this case. The third short film is in this anthology was directed by the same men who brought us Shudder and Alone. The Middleman, it's called. It's a horror comedy, So, this anthology mixes it up pretty nice, as you can tell. So this horror comedy is about a group of friends who take a river rafting trip into a desolate woodland area. One night in the camp, one of the friends jokes that if he dies, the person who sleeps in the middle the next night will be the next to die with him. So the next day when they are swimming in the river, this guy drowns and cannot be located, which causes much trepidation for his surviving friends. The humor here, I think, works well, as the story tosses in some references to other horror films, so if you're a horror aficionado or seen your fair share, you'll get some of the in-jokes in this. The story's pretty good, too, but the segment, I think, does drag a little bit in terms of pacing. I did expect this story to be the best, given the directors involved, but it was simply pretty good, I would say. The last story, called Last Fright, a stewardess must serve a member of a royal family on an airplane with no other passengers, but what is supposed to be an ordinary flight turns into something tragic when the princess forms an allergic reaction and dies. So after the royal house requests that her corpse be sent back immediately for cremation, the stewardess is required to remain on the plane and escort the dead body on the return flight. So this one is a nicely claustrophobic movie that also contributes some well-developed tension between the characters that eventually transitions into supernatural horror. I like the lead actress quite a bit, and there was some creepy moments in this one. The situation itself is pretty good. It's got a good premise, because there's really nothing you can do when you're trapped on an airplane thousands of feet in the air with only the pilot behind a barricade or a secure door and a corpse with you. I mean, it's just the whole scenario is just somewhere you just don't want to be, So if weird stuff starts happening, what are you going to do? You can't, you're not in a house. You can't just run out and find the cops, So I like this one quite a bit. It's probably my second favorite of this anthology. So overall, this anthology, Phobia, really has no duds and has two standout segments, in my opinion. It helps to earn its way into my personal favorites of this year. Now, the availability of this one, I think, is a little bit better. It's moderately available on Region 3 DVD with English subtitles, and you can also find some copies that are all region format as well. Okay, our next film here is very rare. If you thought Memory was obscure, just check out this one. This one's very few people know about this one. It's probably one of the most obscure Asian horror films I'm going to cover during this particular time period. And it's actually perfectly representative of the creativity that one can find in contemporary Asian horror. And I'm talking about Evil Spirit, V, South Korean horror drama anthology. Now, this is an anthology that takes inspiration from Russian writer Nikolai Gogol's short story entitled V, which is about the interaction between a philosopher and a witch, among other things. It may be useful for the viewer to take a few minutes and read a summary of the short story, which is very cool, by the way, before watching this film, because this film is super saturated with references to that story. There's also a Russian movie from 1967 that is based on the same source material and is also worth watching. I enjoyed that one. So what we have in this South Korean entry is 3 short films, approximately 40 minutes each on average, which implement this short story V in 3 distinct ways, but use the same 3 actors in the lead roles. So the first segment is a film within a film about an abrasive young director who is attempting to make a film based off of the V short story. He becomes obsessed with the actress, though, that he hired. So this one starts off a bit slow, but has some very cool scenes and unexpected twists down the stretch. The second segment is where things really kind of kicked off for me. It's basically a direct adaptation of the V story, only shot in a stage play format. So they have like a stage there, but it's not, how can I say this? It's not shot like a documentary. It's shot like an actual film where you have an actor who plays an actor on the stage, kind of going through the motions with this thing. And it sounds kind of weird and simplistic, but it works really well and focuses a lot on the lengthy showdown between the philosopher and the witch as he presides over her dead body for 3 nights. Very interesting. This is very interesting and unorthodox, and it's really hard to describe because they actually use special effects that would not have been used in a stage play. So you have like this really cool combination of stage play style and theatrical film. I really like this one. Probably my favorite segment. The final segment continues the momentum as it shifts to a blind musician who meets a group of marionette artists preparing a play based on the V story. And also it has some nice surprises and operates in a similar fashion to the first short story by building anticipation for the final reveal. So again, this is an anthology that has no duds, and it has a lot of positives here. You know, it's based on the foundation of creativity, unorthodox grace, strong performances, creepy gothic-style moments, and a resolve to avoid most genre cliches. You know, this doesn't have Onryo ghosts. It doesn't have, you know, like jump scares or the typical stuff you would see in a horror film. That makes it interesting. It's not particularly scary, and it will likely be a bit too artsy for some viewers, but this is worth seeking out, and I think it's better than the related Russian film from 1967. So I really hope that someone releases this on DVD at some point in the future, because it seriously needs one. Even if it's a Region 3 DVD, I don't think it was ever released on Region 3 DVD, with or without subs, you know what I mean? Really. So, yeah. I saw this one online. It was on YouTube, or perhaps it was, I don't think it's on Cineflix, and I don't think it's on YouTube anymore, so good luck finding it. Evil Spirit V comes highly recommended, but, you know, definitely seek it out. Alright, our next one here is one that I've been championing for years, ever since I first saw it, and that is Carved 2, The Scissors Massacre, from Japan. So this deals with the origins of the Slit-Mouthed woman, which we covered previously in this playlist. Check out my review of Carved from 2007 for a high-level summary of the legend. And for the record, Carved 2 is not a direct sequel. The setting in this film is 1978, rural Japan. You know, our schoolgirl protagonist lives a good life in a small town. Her family runs a successful farming business. Her older sister is about to get married, and her other sister does good business at a hair salon. So things are going pretty good, but one fateful evening changes her life forever when a man invades her home. Afterward, she suffers from psychological problems and is followed by a woman dressed in red. So you're probably wondering how this incorporates the Slit-Mouthed woman legend, and I'm about to tell you. It starts off kind of like a lighthearted drama early on, but quickly turns violent during that fateful night. There are a few well-executed and bloody death scenes to enjoy, but the dramatic elements are the strength of this movie. You know, it does a very good job of humanizing this ghost-like killer and also establishes a few victims that are both likable and multidimensional. Acting is very solid across the board. The mythos is driven by unfortunate tragedy as well as social ostracization, or persecution, I guess you could say. Really sticks the ending, too. This is one of those horror films that sticks the ending. I would say that, you know, it might be a little bit unpredictable for you, but that's one of the things that makes it good. You know, sometimes when you see origin stories, they don't really nail it. You know what I mean? This one, I think, nails it. It's one of the few films that, like, convincingly establishes the emotional breaking point necessary to actually transform a person, like a normal person, into a vengeful monster. It's a superior film compared to its predecessor, too. I think Carved 2 is a notch above Carved in terms of just everything, really. And I think this movie really deserves a lot more attention than it gets. I consider this one a newer classic, actually. A very interesting film, and if you have the means, definitely check it out. Now this one, Scissors Massacre, again, used to be widely available in the United States. It actually received DVD distribution in the United States, and now it's out of print and difficult to find. So, you know, it's worth seeking out, as I say a lot in this video. Alright, our next film here you will have heard of, I'm quite certain. It's quite crazy, and as soon as I saw it, I fell in love with it, and that is Tokyo Gore Police. So this film is set in a near-future chaotic Japan, okay? It's like an action horror film from Japan, and the Tokyo Police Force has been privatized. A mad scientist known as the Key Man has created a virus that mutates humans into monstrous creatures called engineers, genetically modified supercriminals who can transform open flesh wounds into flesh metal weaponry. So say, a guy gets his hand cut off, his hand will transform into like this flesh weapon hybrid, kind of like a videodrome type weapon that can fire some type of projectile and kill people. So it's definitely a very macabre and cool premise, but a special squad of officers called engineer hunters are created to deal with them. However, unlike the average police force, the engineer hunters are a quasi-military force that utilize violence, sadism, and street-side executions to maintain law and order. So helping the police force out is Ruka, our protagonist, who's a troubled loner, but is very skilled in dispatching the engineers. So this film is directed by Yoshihiro Nishimura, who previously directed Anatomia Extinction, which we covered when we were going through 1995 in this playlist. It's a similar film to this, but on a much lower budget, if you can imagine it. He's mostly worked as a makeup artist previously to this film, and or special effects advisor for tons of movies. I mean, his art credits are at least 4 times longer than his directing credits. But that's a huge advantage for this film, because Tokyo Gore Police packs in a lot of wild, weird, grotesque combinations of flesh and weaponry as humanly possible within one feature-length film. There's tons of macabre imagery in this film, and that's really the reason to watch it. The character designs of the engineers are delightfully over-the-top and ridiculous, and perverted, too. This film is quite perverted. It's a joy to watch, though, if you're into that kind of thing. There's also a lot of good quality gore and enough blood to fill an ocean. There's enough blood in this movie to fill an ocean. And this is one of the big advantages of having a director who specializes in gore effects. Now, with that said, this isn't a particularly mean-spirited film. There is some dodgy, edgy moments to it, but I would not call this mean-spirited. It's actually a lot of fun to watch. It does have that edge to it, mostly due to the gore and violence. But there's a ton of black humor in this, and I found myself laughing more than anything else. Some of the comedy is introduced by way of blackly comical commercial advertisements that are peppered into the film at various times. It's similar to something that you would see in RoboCop. You know what I mean? That's what I was reminded of. More sensitive viewers may be put off by, a few moments that showcase horrific mutations of sex organs, but, if that sounds good to you, have at it, man. You gotta check this movie out. Our lead actress here is Ei Shina, who also starred in Audition, so you'll definitely recognize her in this. The soundtrack in this is also surprisingly good. There's some pretty good jams in this movie. I liked it. Character development, not as strong as some other Asian horror films that have, more traditional filmmaking qualities, because Tokyo Gore Police is kind of a B movie, so to speak. Performances by the supporting characters, they're kind of uneven. But in terms of pure entertainment value, it's hard to beat this movie, in my opinion. It's sweet. In fact, it's probably my personal favorite of the recent J. Gore films, so to speak. And I use the term J. Gore to describe the recent over-the-top violent titles that have been released in recent years. Other examples being The Machine Girl, Hell Driver, etc. And I will cover a few more of those in this playlist if I think the horror elements are strong enough to classify them as such. But, as I said before, you just cannot beat Tokyo Gore Police because it accomplishes exactly what it attempts to do, and it does it in a glorious fashion. Now, fortunately, Tokyo Gore Police is actually widely available on DVD, so there's no excuse not to check this out. Very easy to find. All right, so our final film of the evening. probably my favorite horror film, Asian horror film of this particular year. And we covered a lot of really interesting movies, but I gotta rank this one as number one. And that is Nightmare Detective 2 from Japan. Still haunted by his unwanted abilities, which allows him to enter other people's dreams, as well as memories of his mother dying when he was a child, the nightmare detective slowly drowns in his world of misery. But a young girl, having heard rumors about his extraordinary abilities, visits his home and begs for his help. She tells him she suffers from nightmares that are getting scarier. The murderous entity in her dreams has already killed 2 of her friends, and she's afraid she's the next to die. So director Shinya Tsukamoto directed the first Nightmare Detective film, which was very entertaining, and he returns for the sequel, thankfully. This director exhibits a phenomenal patience in this film that completely eliminates jump scares, as he opts instead to build tension during long-lasting suspense sequences. So there are some expertly crafted white-knuckle stalking scenes in this movie that are very memorable. There's one in an apartment complex that kind of moves up the stairs and into an apartment that's just really good. It had me on the edge of my seat. The script is just jam-packed with ambiguity from start to finish, and this may leave some viewers a bit frustrated at times of figuring everything out, but it does greatly accentuate the serrated structure of actual dreams. There were moments in the first film that were dreamy, but Nightmare Detective 2 takes that aspect to the next level. Some moments are also quite weird, consequently. This dreamy feel is also accentuated by an atmospheric score that creates a hypnotic mood, which is always welcome in my book. The whole aesthetics and mood of this film is just really nice. And this is also less conventional than its predecessor. It has stronger psychological overtones and better character development as well. This is especially true of the protagonist, which gets quite a bit of interesting backstory that is blended in with the horror elements. And I must say that Ryuhei Matsuda gives one of the most convincing performances of his entire career. I think before this movie I was not a big fan of his, even in the first Nightmare Detective film, and then this film kind of won me over for his acting ability. And I like the guy now, but it took a while for him to grow on me, and this was the performance that convinced me. So, good job, my friend. Good job. Now, the DVD availability of Nightmare Detective 2, difficult to find. There used to be an all-region DVD floating around on eBay that is no longer out there. Again, keep looking, though, because this movie is definitely worth seeking out. Again, a lot of really good movies tonight. We got a nice variety. We got a mutant killer baby film, like a psychological horror film, an anthology that mixes it up with different segments. The Korean film Evil Spirit V, which is based on, a Russian novel from years ago back. That is very different from something that you would typically see from any country's horror film. You have Carved 2, which is a very nice origin story. Tokyo Gore Police, a crazy B-grade gore flick. And then Nightmare Detective 2. So very, very, very nice variety for this year, I thought. And the top films of this year are particularly impressive. So that's good. It's always good to see that. So be sure to join me again in my next video. We're finished with 2008, but we will go into 2009, of course. And as always, we'll see you next time.